The coffee was already cold. Eleanor Marsh knew this before she lifted the mug. She knew it the way she knew most things at 3:15 in the morning after a 12-hour shift, not by thinking, but by feeling. The ceramic was room temperature. The liquid inside would be stale and bitter. She drank it anyway. That was Eleanor. She never wasted anything that still had use left in it. She was 58 years old, and she looked every year of it tonight. Not in a broken way, in a weathered way. The way old timber looks after decades of hard seasons, denser than when it started, marked by every storm it survived. Her hands, resting flat on the formica table of Ray's diner, were a nurse's hands, capable, scarred in small ways, permanently clean from too many washings. The diner sat on the eastern edge of Harlow, North Carolina, where the town stopped pretending to be something it wasn't. A strip of gas stations, a bait shop, and a 24-hour greasy spoon with a buzzing neon sign that had given up on the letter R. Eleanor had been stopping here after late shifts for 11 years. She knew which booth had the broken spring. She knew that Donna, the night waitress, refilled coffee without being asked. She knew the refrigerator hum in the back filled the silence if she let it. Tonight she needed the silence. She had lost a patient at 2 in the morning. Gerald, 67, chest pain, 40 minutes of everything done correctly. And sometimes correctly is not enough. This was the part of the job nobody talked about. Not the blood, not the exhaustion, but the drive home at 3 in the morning, carrying someone else's last moment inside you, pulling up to a dark house, walking into rooms where the quiet confirms you are alone with what you know. Her son Daniel was in Texas on a drilling platform in the Gulf. He called twice a year when the timing was right. Her ex-husband had been gone a decade, long enough that the anger had weathered into simple acceptance, the way you accept that some seasons are cold. "Refill, hun?" Donna appeared at the booth edge, pot already tilted. Eleanor pushed the mug forward without looking up. She became aware of the boy across the diner the way a nurse becomes aware of something wrong, not with alarm but with quiet automatic attention. 2 booths down. 19, maybe 20. Short dark hair, clean cut. The posture of someone taught very young to take up as little space as possible. He was not eating. His glass of water was full. She watched him without staring. His hands were completely still, resting flat on the table. Most nervous people moved their hands, tapped, touched their face, rearranged silverware. This boy's hands were motionless, like hers. He was watching the door. She recognized that quality of attention. She had seen it in patients who had survived something and never fully stopped expecting it to return. The body stays ready even when the mind is elsewhere. He was not afraid of what was inside the room. He was afraid of what might come through the entrance. "Hey," she said. His head snapped toward her. "Too fast. You going to drink that water or just keep it company?" He blinked. A small, genuine smile pulled at the corner of his mouth, and for just a moment he looked exactly like what he was. A very young man who was very tired. Sorry, long night. Eleanor looked at him once more. Pupils normal, no tremors, color fine. "Name's Eleanor," she said. "People call me Ellie if they've known me longer than 5 minutes, which you haven't." "Ethan," he said. "Ethan Voss. You, from Harlow?" He shook his head. "Just passing through." There was something in the way he said it, not evasive exactly, more like a man who had been saying it long enough that it had become automatic, as if staying anywhere was not something that applied to him. Then the bell above the diner door rang. Every hair on Eleanor's arms stood straight. She knew before she processed it consciously. 2 men in dark clothes entered with the coordinated spacing of people who had rehearsed walking into a room. One in a gray jacket, Silas, lean with close-cropped sandy hair and eyes that moved too quickly. The other in black, Cross, broader, slower, with the patience of someone who had learned that stillness was more dangerous than speed. Neither looked at the menu, neither looked for a seat. They looked at Ethan, one look, immediately concealed. Eleanor caught it. These men were not here to rob a diner. Donna looked up from the counter, smiling. "Just seat yourselves, hun. Be right with you." Silas pulled a revolver from his jacket pocket and swept it across the room, a short, controlled arc, settling toward Ethan like a compass finding north. Nobody move, not the shout of a scared man, the command of someone running a procedure. The trucker, asleep in the corner booth, woke, saw the gun, went sideways under the table. Donna's face drained white. Her hands shook. The coffee pot clattered against the counter, and she gripped the edge to hold herself upright. Cross moved to position himself between Ethan and the rear exit. He had not spoken. He did not need to. His entire function was to ensure that Ethan did not leave through the back. They came for him, Eleanor thought, with a cold certainty that settled into her chest like ice water. They knew exactly where he was. Then Ethan stood up, not like a man being brave, like a man who had calculated that the math no longer favored staying seated. He rose slowly, hands open, placing himself between Silas and Donna. "Take it easy," Ethan said. "Whatever you came for, leave her out of it." Silas looked at him, not with surprise, with confirmation. The look of a man who has been hunting for a long time and finally sees what he has been hunting standing in the open. "Sit down, boy. You don't want this here." "I'm already here," Ethan said. Cross had taken a half step closer, angling behind Ethan, positioning for a clean shot at the back. Eleanor watched Cross's hand. His grip on the pistol was practiced. His finger moved toward the trigger with the slow inevitability of a clock hand reaching 12. He was going to shoot Ethan in the spine. Eleanor did not think about Gerald. She did not think about Daniel or her dark, empty house, or what happened to women who threw things at armed men. Her hand closed around her coffee mug, cold, ceramic, substantial, and she threw it with every ounce of force her left arm had. It struck Silas on the side of the head. The sound was sharp and wrong, ceramic against bone. And Silas went sideways, his gun arm swinging wide. The revolver discharged into the ceiling. Donna dropped behind the counter. Ethan moved. He covered the distance to Silas in 2 strides and took him down the way someone trained in close contact restraint takes someone down. Controlled, efficient, decisive. The revolver skittered under a booth, but Cross had not moved. Cross had simply waited. He leveled the pistol at Ethan's exposed back with the patience of a man who had been in exactly this position before. Eleanor was already moving toward Ethan, but she saw in the compressed clarity of crisis that she could not reach Cross's arm. She could not stop the shot. Physics is the last law when every other law breaks down. 2 objects cannot occupy the same space. Eleanor threw her body across Ethan's back. The impact was nothing like her clinical knowledge had prepared her for. A force that could not be argued with, hot and total, entering her upper left shoulder and leaving behind a wrongness that had no name in any language she knew. She landed on top of Ethan. The world went white, then bright, then gray at the edges. Cross cursed. The back door banged open. Sirens began somewhere in the distance. Donna had hit the panic button. "Ellie," a voice above her. "Hey, look at me." Ethan had rolled her carefully onto her side. His hands pressed hard against her shoulder. His face was inches from hers, pale with something older than fear, the expression of a man confronting a debt he had not expected to carry. "Keep the pressure," Eleanor said. Her voice came out scraped and thin. "Don't compress the clavicle. Stop talking. I'm a nurse, I know. Stop talking anyway." His eyes were dark in the diner's bad lighting. Then Eleanor's vision blurred at the edges, and for one suspended moment, one moment she would spend weeks attributing to blood loss and shock, she saw his pupils shift, vertical, amber, ancient, there and gone in less than a heartbeat. Silas, slumped against the booth legs, was conscious, but barely. His mouth moved. What came out was not English. Not any language Eleanor had encountered in 30 years of hospital work. Not in a life lived in the American South, where you heard every accent the continent produced. Something older than language as she understood language. syllables with weight in them, sounds carrying history the way old rivers carry silt. Ethan went completely still, his head turned toward Silas, his jaw tightened. Then Eleanor's eyes closed, and the diner and the cold tile and Ethan's hands pressing hard against her wound all faded into a darkness that had no bottom. The last thing she registered was the refrigerator hum in the back of the room, constant, indifferent, still going. 11 miles away in a small house on the west side of Harlow, a man named Ray Kowalski sat in the dark watching the local news with the volume low. He was 65, with the wide shoulders of a man who had once been very strong and the settled stillness of someone who had learned, over many years, how to wait. The banner across the bottom of the screen read, "Armed robbery at Ray's Diner. One suspect in custody. Bystander critically wounded." Ray watched the grainy exterior security footage, a young man in jeans and a dark jacket being guided toward an ambulance. 19, maybe 20, short dark hair. A face Ray had not seen in 3 years. He reached under the side table and pulled out a phone without a manufacturer's name on it. A number dialed from memory. It rang once. "They found the boy," Ray said quietly. His voice was the voice of a man reporting facts. "It started." He listened. "I know," he said. "I'll be ready." He set the phone down, looked at his own reflection in the blank television screen for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the kitchen, and began to make coffee. It was going to be a long night. The hospital smelled like her life. Eleanor had worked in Harlow Regional for 19 years. She knew its sounds. The specific pitch of the third-floor elevator, the way the overnight AC cycled slightly off from a normal heartbeat, the supply cart squeak at 5 in the morning. She had always found those sounds comforting. Waking up as a patient in that place was something else, same ceiling tiles, same smell. But she was on the wrong side of everything. Lying down instead of standing, receiving instead of giving, the monitor beside her beeping out her own pulse. It felt like seeing a photograph of your own house taken from outside. Familiar and wrong simultaneously. She tried to move her left arm. Pain arrived like a door swinging hard into her face. Sudden, total, unimpressed with her tolerance for discomfort. "Water," she said. Her voice came out between a whisper and gravel. Sarah from the 3rd floor held the straw. "Good nurse. Careful hands." Eleanor had trained her 4 years ago. The expression on Sarah's face was the careful neutral that nurses wore when they were worried but not permitted to show it. The bullet had passed through cleanly. She could tell by the quality of the pain. She had been lucky. She registered this with professional detachment. "Where is Ethan Voss?" she said. A man stepped forward from the corner of the room. Eleanor had not noticed him. This bothered her. She noticed everything, always. It was not a choice, but a reflex built over decades. That she had missed him told her he was very good at being unnoticed, which told her something important before he opened his mouth. Mid-40s, lean, hollowed-out face, ill-fitting gray suit, eyes that had not slept but were sharply alert. He held a notepad he had not yet written in. "Miss Marsh, I'm Agent Moss, Harlow Police Department. I need to ask you about the incident at Ray's Diner." "Where is Ethan Voss?" she said again. "The young man has been released. I need to address your actions during the incident. My actions. You initiated physical contact with the suspect by throwing a projectile. This escalated the situation and directly resulted in the discharge of a firearm." Eleanor looked at him steadily. He had a gun to that woman's head. Moss looked at the floor briefly. "The second man was moving to shoot Ethan in the back," Eleanor continued. "I watched his trigger finger. 30 years in trauma medicine. I know when a man has decided to pull." Moss wrote something. The angle of his pen, the small pause before he started. He was writing something adjacent to what she had said, something that would resemble her words without being them. "The suspect's name is Silas," she said. "Adrian Silas. Critical condition, brain bleed. If he doesn't recover, this becomes a different kind of investigation." He snapped the notebook shut. "Don't leave town, Miss Marsh. Don't speak to the press." He left. Eleanor lay in the adjusted silence, listening to her own heartbeat on the monitor, thinking about the way Moss had looked at her. Not the way a detective looks at a witness, the way a man looks at a problem he is actively solving. She was discharged the following afternoon. The bullet had missed everything that mattered. The insurance protocol was efficient and unsentimental. It always was. The administrator who processed her discharge looked at the wall behind Eleanor's head while explaining that coverage handled the procedure, but not the extended stay. Eleanor did not argue. She understood systems. She took a cab home. Her house, single-story rental, beige with white trim, front garden that had once had ambitions, felt smaller than she remembered. She sat on the couch and looked at nothing. Administrative leave, pending investigation. The hospital had procedures, and procedures could not make exceptions for nurses who had been shot stopping a crime, because procedures were only capable of categories. She checked her phone. A voicemail from Daniel. 40 seconds. He had seen the news. He was glad she was okay. He would call again when he had better reception on the rig. His voice had the careful distance of someone who loved his mother but had not yet figured out how to close a gap he had stopped measuring. She put the phone down. The loneliness was not new. She had lived in its dimensions long enough to know its temperature. But tonight it carried different weight. She had nearly died for a stranger, and the machinery of the world had ground forward without pause. And the man with the notepad had looked at her like a complication. And now she sat in a gift shop sweatshirt with a hole in her shoulder, and no one was coming. She heated soup with her right hand. 3 knocks, unhurried, authoritative without aggression. The knock of someone prepared to wait but not to leave. She went to the window first. Old habit. She pulled the curtain edge back 1 inch. A man stood on her front step. Tall, composed, late 40s or early 50s. Black, with close-cropped gray at his temples and a jaw that looked structural rather than cosmetic. Dark suit, not a dress suit, something more utilitarian. Hands empty at his sides, looking directly at the window, at the inch of gap where Eleanor was looking out. She had not moved the curtain enough for him to see her. She was certain of that. She opened the door to the chain. Miss Eleanor Marsh, that's right. My name is Victor Shade. I'm the command security officer for a private organization. I'm here because of Ethan Voss. May I come in? She studied him through the gap. His expression was not warm, but it was honest. The face of a man who had decided before arriving that he would not waste either of their time. Am I in trouble? She said. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close. Not with us, he said. Quite the opposite. She took the chain off. He filled the living room without crowding it, a man accustomed to adapting himself to civilian spaces. He did not sit until she gestured. He did not look around with the cataloging curiosity of someone assessing her belongings. He looked at her. She made tea. Her hands needed something to do. The ritual gave her minutes to think. Shade waited without fidgeting. She brought 2 mugs to the table and sat across from him. He told her about Ethan. Not everything. She understood, listening, that he was giving her exactly what she needed and nothing beyond. The practiced economy of a man who controlled information as a professional discipline. But what he gave her was enough. Ethan was not a student passing through Harlow in any ordinary sense. He belonged to a very old family with very old interests. People had been tracking him for months. The 2 men in the diner had known exactly where he was and exactly what they intended. They were not criminals, Shade said, or rather they were, but incidentally. They were hunters, employed by a private organization operating beneath public awareness. What were they hunting? Eleanor said. Shade picked up his tea. The kind of thing, he said carefully, that most people need time to believe in. Eleanor thought about the pupils in the diner light. Vertical, amber, ancient. She thought about the syllables Silas had spoken. She thought about 30 years of attributing impossible things to shock and medication, and the strange theater the human mind performs under extreme stress. She thought about how certain she had been that what she saw was real. "Take your time," she said. Shade placed something on the coffee table. A coin, genuinely old, worn smooth at the edges by generations of handling. A wolf in profile beneath Latin text, "In umbra veritas." "In darkness truth," Eleanor translated. Shade nodded slowly. Then he told her the rest. "The family Ethan belongs to," he said, "has existed far longer than most institutions you would recognize. They live quietly. They avoid attention. They have their own codes, hierarchies, laws, and they protect their own with everything they have." He looked at her steadily. "You put your body in front of one of theirs last night. That is not something they take lightly, and not something they will let you face alone." "The man who came to my hospital room," Eleanor said. "Agent Moss." Shade's expression shifted by a fraction. "He's not who he says he is," Eleanor said. "It was not a question. No, he is not." Shade set down his mug. "He is the hunter's access point inside the local system. His function is to ensure legal pressure on you increases while the diner investigation goes quiet. He is constructing a case against you, Miss Marsh, not because the law requires it, because his employers need you discredited and isolated before you begin asking the wrong questions." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "What happens tomorrow?" she said. Shade stood and buttoned his jacket with two precise movements. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will not be isolated." He walked to the door, paused in the frame, looked back with those steady eyes. "Trust the process," he said. "The family does not forget what it owes." He left. Eleanor sat at the table long after his car had gone. She turned the old coin in her fingers. The wolf. The Latin worn smooth by hands that had needed something solid across decades or centuries. She went to bed at midnight. She did not sleep. At 6 in the morning, she heard the engines, a low, synchronized rumble working through the walls and into her bones before it fully registered as coming from outside. She went to the window. The street had been transformed. Dark SUVs and two large transport vehicles occupied both ends of the block with the calm precision of people who understood how to control a space. And people everywhere, 50, maybe 60, all moving with focused efficiency that turned the quiet suburban street into the opening phase of a large and well-organized operation. One group dismantled her dead hedgerow with tools brought specifically for that purpose. Another moved across her roof with careful expertise, examining the leak she had ignored for 2 years. A third ran a pressure washer over her driveway, removing oil stains that had accumulated since the previous tenant. Standing at the center of it all, still as the eye of a storm, was Victor Shade. Eleanor looked left. Ray Kowalski stood on his front porch with a coffee mug, watching the operation. Not surprised, not even slightly, he caught her looking. Raised his mug in a slow, small acknowledgement. She had lived next to Ray Kowalski for 7 years. 65, retired civil engineer, widower. He brought in her mail during double shifts, had fixed her porch step without being asked, and refused payment with a single wave. He was the kind of neighbor who was simply there, steady and undemanding, the way good infrastructure is there, noticed most clearly when you imagined it gone. She had never once wondered what he might be carrying under that quiet. She put on her robe and went outside. "Mr. Shade." Shade pivoted. "Good morning, Miss Marsh. What is this?" He looked around at the organized activity with something approaching mild satisfaction. The family authorizes community improvement projects when members of the community have demonstrated they deserve better than what the community has provided them. You brought 50 people to fix my roof, and your drainage problem. He glanced toward the house. The family does not do things partially. "The real reason," Eleanor said. Shade's voice dropped. "Agent Moss filed a report this morning recommending you be moved to suspect status. A Renata Carr is preparing to escalate if Silas's condition deteriorates. Right now, you are a woman alone in a house the local press and police consider accessible." He looked at the assembled personnel. "We are making that assessment incorrect. A news van turned the corner and slowed as it encountered the first SUV. The camera operator climbed out. A reporter in a red coat began speaking into her microphone with the focused urgency of someone who had found a larger story than expected. Then Ray Kowalski crossed the strip of grass between their properties and stood beside Shade. Shade looked at him. "Ray," he said, one word, carrying the weight of a long history. "Victor," Ray said, "same weight, same history." Eleanor looked between them. Shade stepped back exactly half a step, the way you step aside for someone who has earned the right to go first. "There's a conversation that needs to happen," Ray said to Eleanor. "Inside." An hour later, Detective Moss arrived with 2 uniformed officers. He stormed up the driveway toward Shade, pointing a finger at his chest. Shade looked down at the finger until Moss instinctively pulled it back. "You're blocking a public street," Moss snapped. "This is an illegal assembly. I could arrest every single one of these people for obstruction." "We have permits for all vehicles engaged in utility work," Shade said, producing a clipboard. His voice was a resonant, unhurried baritone. "We are working." He gestured to a man meticulously trimming the lawn edge with geometric precision. Moss's jaw tightened. "This is intimidation. You're interfering with an active investigation." A young man in dark clothing stepped forward from Shade's left. He said nothing. He simply stood between Moss and the front path, hands clasped behind his back, looking over Moss's head at the middle distance with the focused blankness of someone who could do this for days. Moss looked at the young man, then at the 40 others positioned across the property, then back at Shade. "This isn't over," Moss said. Shade smiled. It did not reach his eyes, and it was considerably more unsettling for that reason. "No," he agreed, "it isn't." Then the news from the hospital arrived. Shade's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His expression shifted, not visibly to most people, but Eleanor read bodies the way other people read faces, and what she saw in the set of his jaw was a man moving from one phase of an operation into another. "Silas is gone," Shade said. The street went quiet around them. Even the pressure washer seemed to pause. Eleanor did not close her eyes. She had expected this since 2 in the morning. The trajectory had been written in the initial data. "D.A. Carr will have the paperwork within the hour," Shade said. "She's been waiting for exactly this." Eleanor straightened. "Then I should go meet them," she said. "I won't have people hurt standing in front of a door for me. This has gone far enough. If Moss and Carr want to—" Shade stepped in front of her, not blocking, something more considered than blocking. "Miss Marsh," he said. His voice had changed. The professional distance was gone, replaced by something more direct, more honest. "You went into that diner and put your body in front of a bullet for someone you did not know. You did not hesitate. You did not calculate." He paused. "Lord Kane has been alive for 800 years. He has witnessed the full catalog of what human beings do to each other. He has seen very few people do what you did. He does not intend to let a small city district attorney undo it." He picked up his phone. 10 minutes, he said. "Trust the process." Eleanor looked at Ray. Ray looked at his coffee mug. "That's usually what you do," he said, when Victor Shade says 10 minutes. Shade walked to the front path to intercept the approaching police vehicles. Eleanor stood at her kitchen window and watched the street. Moss's cruiser, then a black town car with municipal plates, D.A. Renata Carr, arriving precisely timed for the cameras. A reporter was attempting to breach the perimeter and being declined by a man who looked capable of redirecting weather systems with his hands. The machinery of the small city legal system grinding toward her. She looked at Ray. "There's something you need to know about those 2 men from the diner," Ray said quietly, "and about what they were really there for." He looked at her steadily. "And there's something you need to know about your son." Eleanor sat down. Ray set his mug on the table. He folded his hands. He looked at Eleanor the way a man looks at someone when he is about to tell them something that will change how they understand several years of their own life. 3 years ago, he said. August. Your son Daniel was working on the Meridian platform, the Brennan Gulf rig off the Texas coast. There was a storm system that came in fast, stayed offshore, off the news cycle in about 2 days. Eleanor remembered. She had called Daniel twice during that storm. He hadn't answered. She had told herself it was the signal. The platform lost exterior scaffolding in the surge, Ray said. One of the crew went into the water, 40 feet down, north side. Retrieval conditions were bad. The safety crew was managing a secondary deck fire simultaneously. He stopped, looked at his hands. It was Daniel who went in, Eleanor said. Ray met her eyes. Yes, Ethan was in the area. He went into the water after him. The conditions were, he paused, choosing each word, conditions that would have killed most people. Ethan held Daniel at the surface for 11 minutes until the rescue team reached them. By the time they pulled Daniel out, Ethan was already gone. Eleanor was very still. Daniel never told me. He didn't know who Ethan was, Ray said. He only knew that a young man had saved him and disappeared. He filed a report with the platform's safety office. It went nowhere. Ethan doesn't leave paperwork. That's by design. Eleanor sat with this. She thought about Daniel's voice, 3 days after that storm, careful, quiet, rearranged in some way she hadn't been able to name. She had attributed it to exhaustion. She had attributed it to the distance between them. She looked up. "And you," she said. "Lord Kane asked me to be aware of Daniel after that," Ray said. "And when I moved to Harlow, the work brought me here, but you being here was also part of the reason. Kane wanted someone close who understood the weight of what his son had done." 7 years, Eleanor said. Ray nodded. "You've been my neighbor for 7 years as part of this." Ray looked at her for a moment. "I've been your neighbor for 7 years because you are good company, and you don't make noise after 10 and you bring in your trash cans without being reminded," he said. The other part was also true. But Ellie, one thing didn't make the other thing false. Eleanor held his gaze. Then something in her chest, a tightness that had been there since Moss had stood at the foot of her hospital bed, slowly released. She turned to look at Ethan, who had come in through the back 20 minutes ago and had stood silently in the kitchen doorway throughout Ray's account. He had not said a word. He was still wearing jeans and a dark canvas jacket, his face carrying the specific exhaustion of someone who had been running on something other than sleep for too long. He looked back at her. He gave one small, slow nod. Not an apology. Not an explanation. A confirmation. "I know who you are. I knew before you did." Eleanor sat with the full weight of it, not just the diner, but 3 years. A storm surge, 40 feet of dark water, 11 minutes, her son's voice rearranged by something she hadn't understood. The entire architecture of how she had arrived at that booth in Ray's diner at 3:15 in the morning, not random, not accidental. A debt that had been accumulating interest across years without her knowledge. She needed somewhere to put all of it down. She sat down. Then Shade stepped through the front door. He was not wearing his jacket. For the first time since Eleanor had met him, he looked like a man rather than a function. Something loosened in his bearing, the way soldiers look in photographs taken the day after something ends. "We have a problem," he said. He held up his phone. D.A. Carr had accelerated the timeline. Silas's death had changed the political calculus. She needed a visible win, and Eleanor was the most accessible target. Carr was moving for immediate arrest. No bail hearing until morning. She wanted Eleanor processed tonight, in time for the morning news cycle. And the SWAT team was 2 minutes out. "I should go out and meet them," Eleanor said. She stood. The movement pulled at her shoulder and she absorbed the pain with practiced competence. "I won't have anyone hurt standing in front of a door for me. This has gone too far." Shade moved between her and the front door. "Miss Marsh," he said, "sit down." Eleanor did not sit, but she stopped. Shade looked at her with those steady eyes, and in them something had shifted, not softer, but more direct, as if the layers of professional management had been set aside in favor of something more honest. "Condition dark," he said quietly, almost to himself. He looked at her. Lord Kane authorized it. Do you know what it means? He told her. It means, he said, that we hold this line until the situation is resolved by legitimate federal authority. It means the family has made a determination that you are worth the cost. He looked at the window. And it means that what happens on that front lawn in the next few minutes is going to be on every news channel in this country by tomorrow morning. He paused. Trust it, Eleanor. He went outside. Through the front window, Eleanor watched what followed. Shade walked down the front path as the SWAT vehicles rolled up. Armored, deliberate, the county's maximum force deployed against one nurse with a sling and a coffee mug. D.A. Carr stepped out of her town car flanked by officers, her face arranged for the cameras into the expression of a public servant performing a difficult but necessary duty. Then Shade turned and spoke one word into his radio, "Hold," and the old guard turned, all of them, simultaneously. Every person on that lawn rotated to face the police line in a single fluid movement, as if something invisible had been given a direction, and they had all become its expression at once. No weapons, no aggression, no raised voices. 50 bodies forming a wall of absolute refusal, the kind of stillness that is more frightening than violence because it contains no anger, only certainty. The absolute, unambiguous certainty of people who have decided they are not moving and have made peace with every consequence of that decision. The SWAT commander raised his fist. His team halted. Nobody wanted to be the one to begin what those cameras would finish. Nobody wanted to explain, in a hearing room, why they had deployed maximum force against 50 unarmed people standing on a residential lawn to arrest a woman who had taken a bullet saving a life. The mathematics of the optics were impossible, and the commander was experienced enough to see it immediately. D.A. Carr's face was a composition in suppressed fury. Then the sky changed. A low percussion built from the east, not trucks this time. The specific heavy rhythm of rotor blades in descent, growing rapidly from distant vibration to a physical presence that rattled the kitchen window and bent the trees along the street. A helicopter, black and unmarked, dropped toward the cul-de-sac with a purposefulness that was completely unlike any news aircraft. Its downdraft swept the lawn and forced the SWAT team to turn their faces away. The side door opened before the skids touched. 3 black SUVs came around the corner from the other direction, bypassing the police barricade, stopping on the lawn with coordinated precision. Doors opened and people in suits moved outward across the perimeter, not toward the old guard, but spreading to contain the entire area, repositioning the boundaries of who controlled what. The lead figure, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and the bearing of someone who had spent a career walking into rooms and immediately owning them, moved directly toward Moss with credentials extended. She was identified only by Shade later as Agent Harlow, FBI. She said something to Moss at close range. Brief, measured, final. Moss's face changed. Inside the kitchen, a woman Eleanor had not seen enter was standing beside the counter, sharp-featured, carrying a leather briefcase, with the focused expression of someone who solved problems by reading them to exhaustion. Shade had appeared in the doorway behind her. Lyra Knox, Shade said, the family's legal officer. Knox set her briefcase on the table and opened it without ceremony. The second man from the diner, she said. Cross. He was apprehended at the state line 3 hours ago. He is cooperating fully with federal investigators. She pulled out a single document and set it flat on the table. Silas and Cross were contracted by Helios Corporation, a private biomedical firm operating under a security consulting designation. Their objective was not elimination. It was live acquisition. They had a vehicle 3 blocks from the diner carrying medical equipment, sedatives, and restraints sufficient for a prolonged transport. She looked at Eleanor. Cross confirmed that everyone in that diner was to be eliminated after Ethan was secured. No witnesses. The equipment in the bag confirmed it. Eleanor thought about Donna behind the counter, the trucker under the booth, the ordinary Tuesday night of an ordinary diner. Your intervention, Knox continued, was not aggravated assault. According to the federal prosecutor who reviewed Cross's statement 40 minutes ago, you engaged in active threat in the process of initiating a mass casualty event. The legal designation is defense of others under extreme duress. She closed the briefcase. All charges against you are dismissed with prejudice. The U.S. Attorney's Office has taken jurisdiction. D.A. Carr has been informed. Eleanor looked out the window. D.A. Carr was being briefed by Agent Harlow on the lawn, the town car between them and the cameras. Carr's posture had contracted. Shoulders in, jaw forward. The body language of someone receiving information that is collapsing the architecture of their afternoon. Moss was in handcuffs. He was not struggling. He had the expression of a man who had made his calculations and found that this outcome was within the range he had accepted. The relief arrived not as elation, but as release, a long, profound unwinding of tension that Eleanor had been carrying since the moment Moss had stood at the foot of her hospital bed and looked at her like a problem to be managed. The cold weight in her chest was simply gone. "It's over," she said. The words came out quiet. Ethan was beside her. She had not heard him move. He crossed the kitchen and did something she had not seen him do since the diner floor. He went to his knees in front of her chair. Not dramatically, not performed. The motion of someone acting from an impulse deeper than decision, the way hands go up before you know you're falling. His head was bowed. Eleanor. He said her name for the first time. Not Ellie, not Miss Marsh. Eleanor. The way you say a name when you mean all of it. She put her right hand on the side of his face the way she had put her hand on the faces of frightened patients, grounding them back into their bodies, back into the present, back into connection with something real. He looked up. Behind the young face and the exhausted eyes, she could see it clearly now. The depth that had no bottom. Not frightening, just ancient. Like standing at the edge of something very old and understanding that its age was not a threat, but simply what it was. "I would do it again," she said. "Right now, without thinking." "I know," he said. "That's exactly why." He stood. Outside, the machinery of the operation was disassembling itself, the SWAT vehicles pulling away, the news vans repositioning for a different story than the one they had come to cover, the federal personnel beginning the quiet process of securing the scene and producing the paperwork that would follow all of this for months. Shade came inside for the last time. He was not wearing his cover. He looked human, tired and satisfied in the way of someone who has completed something that mattered. "We're pulling back," he said. "Agent Harlow has the federal perimeter. You're safe." He looked around the kitchen. The repaired light fixture, the fixed drain, the window latch that had been sticking for a year, now moving smoothly. He looked at all of it with quiet satisfaction. "Shade," Eleanor said. He looked at her. "Tell Lord Kane his son is a good young man. Whatever else he is, he's good." Shade's expression did something she had not seen it do. It softened, not into sentimentality, but into honesty, the kind that doesn't require decoration. "He already knows," Shade said, "but it will mean something, coming from you." He offered his hand. Eleanor shook it. Then he walked out. Ray was last. He stood in the kitchen doorway with his flannel jacket and his empty mug, and the settled look of a man who had done what he came to do. "You should sleep," he said. "Tomorrow," Eleanor said. Ray nodded once. He stepped off the porch. He stopped. "For what it's worth, Ellie," he said, without turning around, "you were always one of us, even before any of this. Some people just are." He walked back across the narrow strip of grass to his own front door and went inside. Ethan was already gone. She had not heard him leave. She turned from the doorway, and he was simply not in the kitchen anymore. Not a departure so much as the ending of a presence. The space rearranged by his absence. On the kitchen table, he had left a watch. Small-faced, worn leather strap, the style of a piece not manufactured for at least 60 years. The glass unscratched. Someone had been very careful with it across a very long time. The hand stopped at 417, frozen at whatever moment its owner had last worn it, and not wound it again. Eleanor picked it up, lighter than expected. She turned it over. On the case back, engraved in an older script, "For E, always." She stood at the table holding it for a long time. Then she carried it to the living room and set it on the mantelpiece beside the photograph of Daniel at 18. Before the oil rigs, before the distance, before all the years she had told herself were simply how things had become. She stepped back and looked at both of them together. The boy she had raised and the object left by a boy who had pulled her son from 40 feet of dark water and then walked away without leaving a name. She understood, standing there, that nothing about the past 3 years had been what she thought it was. Not the distance, not the silence, not Daniel's carefully rearranged voice on the phone after the storm. There had been a thread running through all of it, connecting things she had experienced as separate and random, and tonight she had finally seen the full shape of it. She was not angry. She was not shaken. She felt in a way she could not have anticipated, less alone than she had in years. She washed her face, looked at herself in the mirror. A 58-year-old woman with a sling, shadows under her eyes, and a scar beginning to form on her shoulder where the bullet had made its argument and lost. She picked up her car keys from the hook by the door. 2:47 in the afternoon. Her shift started at 3. People needed help. Eleanor Marsh had work to do. 6 months later, a package arrived with no return address and international postage stamps layered across the top. Inside the outer wrapping was a wooden box, dark-grained and old, with a simple brass latch. Inside the box, resting on cloth folded with great care, was a photograph, Ethan. Standing in a desert landscape she did not recognize, late afternoon amber light behind him, not in any uniform. Jeans and a dark jacket, the same kind he had worn in her kitchen. He was grinning at the camera with an expression so genuinely unguarded that it made her chest ache in a good way. Thumb up. Beneath the photograph, a single card. Handwritten in very black ink on very white paper, the script old-fashioned and deliberate. To Eleanor Marsh, guardian of the threshold, in darkness you held the light. The debt stands, always. Eleanor put the photograph on the mantelpiece, between Daniel's picture and the stopped watch. She stood back and looked at all three of them for a long moment. Then she picked up her keys and went to work.